like that. So that is one part. Then also understanding, cognitive, studying scripture, and then introspection, looking at oneself, and things that aid in one's own growth, psychological growth, makes me a human being who's more sensitive to myself, to the environment, to other beings. These are all, when I develop certain qualities like that, then I develop a frame of mind which starts looking at things, which is capable of, what is it that makes a poet, for example? Why do we teach children poetry in school? Poetry, a poet, can you create a poet? Can you create a poet? Why not? So then why do we teach poetry to kids? Are we trying to create poets? No. But then, if I am exposed to poetry, for example, I read a poem in the beginning, you just read it. It is very difficult to appreciate a poem in its many depths. So it is just printed funny. So it's not even a complete straight line. So poetry is written lengthwise. It's incomplete. Nowadays, at least old poems used to rhyme. The modern poets don't even rhyme. Nothing rhymes, or words, sentences don't end with the same letter. So these kinds of. But then, when you study poetry, you learn to appreciate the nuances that go into a poetry, the nuances of language, and you learn to see how you appreciate certain things. You start to look at things beyond what is obvious. So I look at a flower, it's a pink color. When a poet looks at a flower, it's a different perception. So when more and more I expose myself to that, I begin to get the capacity to look beyond the obvious. Right? And so if there is a potential poet inside, that's going to come out. And devotion is also like that. It's a potential in us. It's a sentiment, but it is not expressed because it doesn't have an opportunity to express. Like love. But if an opportunity is there, even get a pet. But that's why in this country, people like to get pets for their kids. This is an American dream. Is to have a house with a pool and a pet. What does the pet have to do in all this? But really no, if pet completes the picture, because for a child, it helps them recognize, what it is to be responsible for another being who's dependent on you, all kinds of things. So when an opportunity is there, it evokes something in us that otherwise doesn't get a chance, they not get to express. So if I have to recognize this sentiment of devotion, which is a connection between me and the Lord, then my mind should have, first of all, the psyche should have the capacity to look at things in a certain way, beyond the obvious. Correct? Plus, it has to have the environment in which it can express itself. So here the environment, the goal, the object of my relationship is divine. The Lord, divinity, whatever we call it. Something which is higher. Now, so that has to come into the picture somehow. How is that going to come into the picture? So with knowledge, with understanding, with learning to see things. In Gita there are 2 chapters where, so he talks about how I am in all that you see, that is glorious, that strikes awe in you. When you look around you, that is the image of divinity. When you look at a child, face, you see the face of divinity. When you see something beautiful, you see the face of divinity. You see its expression, something unique. You watch National Geographic. I love to watch National Geographic channel. Not because of the violence. There's a lot of violence there. But then really, it's there's something, it strikes awe in you. Anything that you see there. So in the beginning, even though God is everywhere, we say, that is our standard mantra. God is everywhere, God is everywhere. But then, in that everywhere is not obvious. It's not obvious. So then first I have to learn to see that expression in things which first strike awe in me, which are extraordinary. Before I can learn to see divinity in the ordinary. So in the Gita you go through this whole chapter where he talks about how I am there in the extraordinary. That doesn't mean the Lord is not there in ordinary things. In fact, the Lord is so ordinary that we miss the Lord. But only when I can. So it's a kind of an understanding that cultivates in me a capacity to then see things, and then finally see that same Lord even in things in which I think the Lord, how can the Lord be here? In this horrible thing. So that is the environment. When we say environment, it is an internal environment and also the external environment. We think we have to run away from the world. In tradition, we have this whole understanding which is a misinterpretation, that the world is a problem. You have to get away from the world. The world traps you, which is all true. The world can trap you, but the world need not trap you. It's not the problem with the world. You don't have to run away from it. What are you running away from? On the one hand, I say this whole creation is nothing but an expression of the Lord. Then I say I have to get away from this. Then are you getting away from the Lord? If I am able to see the Lord in this creation, then what am I getting away from? But if I don't see the Lord, then I have to get away from it, because I don't see the world as the Lord. Then it traps me. So then you say, you don't get away from the world, you get away from the trap, which is your misperception. So the environment includes spiritual practices, it includes certain devotion, cultivating. That's why prayer, things like that. When you give form, sentiments. I said it's a sentiment. For a sentiment to be real, it has to be expressed. Any sentiment is like that. One cannot just live with a sentiment inside without its expression. If I love somebody, I have to express it. You have to say it. You have to show it. You can't just say, well, you know how I feel. So, for sentiments become real when they are expressed. And when sentiments are expressed, then they also, they get evoked also. They go together. One is kind of connected to the other. So sometimes I don't have the full expression of the sentiment. But then in expressing it, in doing pujas, in doing worship, in doing things, in doing prayers, that the process, the action evokes the sentiment. Because the action is associated with the sentiment. The sentiment can evoke an action, the action can evoke the sentiment. So these are the things which is what Sri Rama tells Sabari. What are the means? Listen to my story, Katha. He says, study Shravanam, then the study of the scripture, value. So whatever we study as spiritual practices, prayers, meditation, all that he includes as means to create that environment in which bhakti has to express them. So we have to give it an opportunity to express. It's not a matter of creating a feeling in you. I can't create something which I don't know. I can't choose to be angry. Any sentiment. We cannot command a sentiment. We cannot command a feeling deliberately. So I cannot say, I'm going to be a bhakta, no, I'm going to work on bhakti. Like we work on problems, no? I got a problem, I got to work on this. You will say, I have anger problems, I got to work on the anger. I got these problems, I got to work on it. So I got a bhakti problem. I got to work on my bhakti. That's how we talk nowadays. It doesn't work like that. I can't work on my bhakti. What am I going to work on? I got to work on finding love. Either it's a project, Go to the beauty parlor, all this stuff. What are the means? There's nothing like that. But it is there. Because I'm a human being, because I have sentiments, because I'm connected to the Lord. That is all a given. So since it is all a given, it is part of my very being. I have that connection. I have to recognize the connection. And in recognizing the connection, then the bhakta manifests differently, depending on one's personality. Whether it's a Hanumanji or a Veerabai or whoever it is, I don't have to be like them. I have to only be me. So it's a kind of a, that's how I understand it.
Welcome back, everybody.
Same people were here. They kind of know me.
Anybody new here?
Yeah.
Babuji.
No.
She
met you.
She met you.
Yeah.
Just that.
No, there is the stotra. So
Yeah.
you praise the Lord in many different ways. So we have to introduce you in many different ways.
Tava tattvam na janami kidrishosi maheshwara yadrishosi mahadeva tadrishaya namo namaha. So this is a prayer. It's a beautiful prayer. So I think it says, so tava tattvam na jana, I do not recognize the truth about you, O Lord. Kidrishosi, I do not know where you are, in which direction you are, I don't know. So Yadrishosi Mahadev, in whichever direction you are, wherever you are, so in that direction, so is my salutation to you. This is our unique tradition, really. So I do not know your form. Every religion says, we don't know the form, Lord is formless, Lord is formless. I say, okay, the Lord is without form, we say. So that means you don't break all the forms that are there. He says, I don't know, you are formless. So that means in every form you are there. It's like space. So in any form I can see you. Since you don't have a particular form. The infinite is always formless. But it is constituted of forms. All the forms put together become formless. All the numbers put together become infinite, including zero. So, it's easy to talk, we say these things, but then we contradict what we say by our own actions. So if my Lord is formless, why do I have problem with people whose Lord have forms? What's my problem? When Gita Bhagavan says, in whatever form people invoke me, I make myself available to them in that form. It's like you and your kid. In whatever form your kid chooses to see you, a little child. One day he sees you as a tyrant. One day he sees you as somebody loving, giving. One day he sees you as punitive. Do you think it really bothers you? It doesn't bother you. And we think that God is going to get offended. Our God will get so offended. Because another human being who is also made in His image somehow happens to think that he has 4 hands. That's the form you can visualize. So it's a very, when you think about it, it's a pretty immature way of thinking. It's a very literal way of thinking. So that is how we recognize Bhagavan in that way. So sentiment always has to have an expression. And prayers, etc., all become. That's why everything has a place. Prayers, meditation, study, spiritual practices, they all have a place. Can we shut that? Where is that sun coming from?
You have to stay in the seat.
Oh, just that one slack, huh?
Yeah. Did that help?
Just to do it manually. Yeah, I'll take care of it.
Ah, yeah.
That's the lungs.
Om Shuklam Varadharam Vishnu Shashivarnam Chaturbhujam Prasanna Dhyayet Sarvavignopasantaye Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murtibheda Vibhagine Vyomavad Vyapta Dehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Punattu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu ma Vishvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So I thought that this would be a very useful topic to little bit think about, and which is forgiveness. So forgiveness is a term that we use often. We advise people, oh, you should forgive, forgive this, forgive that, forgive the person. Or we are advised also, likewise. You should forgive. Yes, why don't hold on to this anger. Forgive the person, forgive. So and then we try also. Because we want to be mature. When you are young, parents always say, forgive your brother. He's younger than you. He's immature, he's this, he's that. And the more we are told, the more we resent it. The more we resent it. So then I'm paid somebody, forgive. Okay, then even suppose I want to forgive. Because that's the thing to do. I'm told that's the right thing to do. That's what makes you grown up. That you're a wise person. So I try to forgive, Nothing happens. So then I believe I forgive. Then something else happens and the whole thing erupts again. So this forgiveness business doesn't seem to really work. So what is this about now? I think, what is this about? It's not something, if I honestly look at myself, it doesn't seem to work. Neither it works in anybody else. I notice that too. For all that people talk, nobody really forgives anybody, deep down. It's all sitting there somewhere, in some corner. All it is not shown, that's all. So not too long ago, there was a case, in the news. So somebody shot, this is a common, shot and killed some young man. So there was this case going on. So finally, this person is convicted of murder. And in that courtroom, this all came in the news, okay, not a story. So the mother is there, the mother of this young man who was killed. So once the judge, the jury convicts him, and then they announce the judgment. And so the mother, makes a statement there, tells this man, they're taking him away, and she tells him, I forgive you, I forgive you. This is not unusual, in this country, I've seen this. So she gets up and says, I forgive you. And I'm sure she believed it or she meant it, because then I'm sure she was perhaps told that you should forgive. So she wanted to forgive, she told him directly to his face, I forgive you. Then I notice also in the news, she comes out of the court. And of course, this newscast is there, all this, the news break fellows, CNN and all.
Narda.
So they ask her, so what do you know, judgment, the conviction was there, then this was a judgment, I think they were passing.
Sentencing.
The sentencing, yeah. So then they asked her, so what did you think of the sentence? And she was very upset. She was very upset because, she felt that it was not fair, the sentence that he was given. That he should have been given a more severe sentence. So then I'm thinking, you just said, I forgive you. You just told the man, I forgive you. And then now you are so upset about the sentence. So I don't understand, what is this forgiveness? So that made me think. Then I did my research cap, I put on, what does it mean when we say to forgive somebody? What does it mean really? What does it mean? You tell me, any idea? What does it mean to forgive?
Forget and forgive.
So forget and forgiveness alone is a problem. Now I'm supposed to forget.
You should not forget.
I should not only forgive but also forget.
Yeah, otherwise you cannot forgive.
Some people don't even give you a chance to forgive. They say forget.
Forget.
Forget this happened. they do all the injustice that they want to do to you, do to me, and then they tell me, forget it happened, forget it happened, forget it happened, nothing happened, forget. Then I say, oh, okay, oh, how do I forget? Here I'm seething inside. And forget the question of forgiveness. You're just asking me to forget, because you don't want to take responsibility. So this forgive and forget business also doesn't work. Forgive doesn't work. Forget doesn't work. How can both work together? So what does it mean to forgive? Does it mean to forget?
Overlook whatever they did.
Does it mean to overlook? Does it mean to overlook what somebody did? Is that the right thing to do?
The only way you can forgive is if you understand, the other person doing whatever
No,
crime.
the question is not how to forgive. The question is what does it mean?
What is forgiveness?
To forgive, what does it mean really?
Making the man to repent for it, not
And making somebody repent for what they did. Is that forgiveness?
forgive.
That is called punishment. It's not forgiveness. So then, of course, if you run into these situations, you should always Google, So, according to the Google, it says, so forgiveness is a cessation of anger or resentment as a result of perceived offense to you. So it has two components. One is that a cessation of the anger and resentment. And the other, the second component is, so a cessation of a desire for restitution or punishment. So this is how it works. There is a here pattern here. So a person A does something to a person B, and the person B feels hurt, unjustly hurt and angry. And so he wants his hurt and anger to be acknowledged by the other person who caused him the pain and the hurt or perhaps a loss. And this anger and hurt, so not only that, if there is a loss incurred, a damage incurred, I want some kind of a restitution. Restitution for the damage. Somebody hits your car. What's the very least thing you expect? That the person will compensate you for the repair. A repair. So you want, that is called restitution. Or sometimes you want the person to be punished. So either you want to be compensated or you want to be, so it's called a punitive.
Or
You
both.
want a punitive response. Punished for what they did. This is what B expects. Now, the A person, suppose, let us take an example of this to understand the dynamics, that is involved in forgiveness. There is a certain dynamic involved in forgiveness that has to play itself out. The process plays itself out. So, I come to your house. You invite me for Diksha. So, Babuji invited me for Diksha. I come to the house and then we are going around, I happen to be walking around and all. So in the process, in the corner there is a beautiful vase on a table. And so I happen to knock it. Looks like an expensive piece. And it falls. And it breaks. Perhaps nobody noticed. Perhaps nobody noticed. So then I don't say anything. I go there and sit down. Then dinner, everything is over. And I quietly leave and go. Then Babuji noticed that the glass is broken. What happened? Who broke this? How did this happen? So I don't know, nobody. Then one of the other friends, he asked, did anybody notice anything? So then somebody says, I didn't notice how it happened, but I noticed that Dhiraji was walking around in that corner. Walking around in that corner. But I don't know, I didn't see anything. So next trip when I come, and then some, bhikshas are being arranged. And then Babuji is asked, would you like him to come home for bhiksha? So he said, I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure. So maybe this time we'll skip it. So, this is one scenario. The other scenario is, and then of course he's hurt. He's hurt, he feels bad, and how could he do this, if did he do this, and if he did it, and why didn't he just tell me, and all kinds of things happen. The other scenario is, so this happened, so I go up, and then I tell him, Babuji, I have something to tell you. So I just happened to be in that corner accidentally. I didn't notice this, and I knocked over this vase, and it fell and it broke. And I apologize, I'm sorry about it. And in fact, I noticed a similar vase. So yesterday in the mall, and don't worry, I'll get that for you, before I leave. So then I said that, he said, no, don't worry about it. I never wanted this in this corner. She just bought it and put it there. I was looking for a way to get rid of it. So you did it for me, and don't worry about it, it's all okay. So everything is over. So next time when I come, I get the bhiksha, So because this is all, it's all done. So what happened here? What happened?
First of all, it was acknowledged.
Yeah. So in this, there are things that happen. So there was a event. There was damage that was done to the person unjustly. It has nothing to do with this. He finds himself with the expense broken. But then there is an acknowledgement. There is an acknowledgement that I did this. I did this. The next thing is, besides acknowledge, then there is an apology. There is an apology. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do this. I'm sorry. There is an apology. Please excuse me. Then I will get, there is a damage, there is a loss. So I offer to replace it. But there is a promise of restitution. Restitution. And so that allows the other person, it removes all the barriers. The other person says, don't worry about it. It doesn't matter. In fact, he looks at me, I'm so upset. And he says, don't worry about it. Really speaking, I didn't even want it there. So he shares his secret. This is his secret.
My wife got this watch.
So all is forgiven. And we move on in life, correct? We move on. So, what happened to the relationship? So the relationship had a crisis. Okay. There was a temporary crisis, and that crisis was overcome. And it reverted back to either status quo, what it was before, or even better.
What about another scenario? Same vase broke, and you acknowledged, you apologized, and you offered to find a duplicate, and the person goes on having a tantrum, oh, that was an heirloom piece. it can
Okay,
never
so
be
we will
replaced.
look at, yeah, so we're trying to understand. So this is the simple dynamic of what is called as forgiveness. Okay. If forgiveness means, so a cessation of anger and hurt on part of the person, the recipient of the injustice, and a cessation of the desire for restitution and punishment. That's the definition of forgiveness. So what makes that possible is if the person who does the, who's the perpetrator of the injustice, so acknowledges it, apologizes, asks for forgiveness, promises restitution, then the forgiveness is possible. Okay? This is the psychological dynamic of forgiveness. Then it works. It maintains relationships and can even improve relationships. Then sometimes it doesn't work. And the reason it doesn't work is because this whole dynamic gets disrupted. So in this dynamic of forgiveness, what are the important elements? Let us look at that. Let's look at that. In life, we all find ourselves in a position where we need to be forgiven and where we need to forgive. And we always find obstacles to both. So for which we need to understand what these obstacles are. In order to understand, we need to know what are the first important elements that are there in this particular process. So in forgiveness, an important thing, as we saw, the first thing was acknowledgement. How does one acknowledge? What is that acknowledgement? The acknowledgement involves the use of the word pronoun I. I has to be used. I broke the vase. Not the vase was broken. It fell down. Not all these kinds of funny things. I broke it. So that is called acknowledgement. What is the next important thing besides acknowledgement? I acknowledge the personal accountability. The next thing is an apology. I'm sorry. So an apology indicates a regret. This is all true. A true apology. I'm sorry that this happened. And that is a regret on my part that this happened to me and this happened to you. So there is a regret indicated by an apology. Then the other important component is asking to be excused. I did something unjust to you, so I need you to free me from my debt that I now owe you. You have to free me. That is empowering the other person. Because you were helpless in this. I did something to you, but then I am in your debt now. You need to free me from the debt. Another meaning of forgiveness is when you forgive a debt. If somebody owes you something and you don't want it back, you say, you forgive the loan. Banking, they use this word. You forgave the loan. So this allows the other person, it is in their hand whether to forgive or not to forgive. That means I have empowered the other person now. And I have put myself under that person's obligation. Okay, look at what all things go on. Now it is up to the other person to say, I forgive you or I don't. I'll make you pay for it. You pay for it, and then I have to be ready for that. Then restitution. I'll say, I'll get you another piece to replace this. So which shows a desire. It validates my regret and also shows a desire to compensate for it. That I don't want you to incur the loss because of something I did. So that is restitution. Asking for when I do all these things, and sometimes an explanation. This is what was happening. I was walking around and I didn't notice it, and therefore I hit it, and it fell. So a simple explanation, the purpose of which is to show that it was not intentional. It wasn't that something I was holding on to from the last visit, that I purposely happened to knock it and drop it. That it was truly accidental. It's just a simple explanation. The purpose of which is not to excuse myself, that it wasn't my fault. It is not for the reason of to be excused, but just to show that it was not deliberate. And when these things happen, it's a very easy thing for the person to say, it's okay. Doesn't matter to me. Don't worry about it. Things like that. So I am able to complete the whole process of forgiveness. Unfortunately, this is not how it goes most of the time. This is how it's meant to go. This is the smooth sailing, and this also happens a lot of the time. We do things to each other all the time. We hurt each other all the time. And then this is what happens in the dynamic. But then there are a lot of times when we don't do this. There are impediments to an apology. There are impediments to forgiveness, both. So there are ways in which, what makes an apology ineffective? Though there are ineffective apologies. So these are what are called as a non-apology apology. They call it a non-apology apology. That means, you apologize for, what do they say? For the politically correct apology. Yeah. So it's called a non-apology apology. So which goes like this. It's an apology without any substance. Without any substance. So we'll say, so I do something that hurts you. And it causes damage, you are upset, etc. Not fair, not right. Then I say, I'm sorry you feel hurt. I'm sorry. Then you say, I'm so hurt by what you said. I'm sorry you're hurt. Now, I'm sorry you're hurt. Is that an apology? It's not an apology. Because it doesn't have the element of personal responsibility or acknowledgement. It's like I had nothing to do with it. You're hurt, it's your problem. Why did you get hurt? But you're always, we do something to somebody. Then the person gets hurt. And then we say that, well, I'm sorry you're hurt, but then you always get hurt. You are so sensitive. That's your problem. So where is the apology here? So there is this is one type of no, I'm sorry you're hurt. Or the other one is, this is political, So I do things that cause a lot of problems, make a lot of mistakes, Then I say, these things happen. Mistakes were made. So this comes a lot you hear on the news cycle. Mistakes were made. By whom? By whom is never mentioned, you know. But mistakes, it's called generalization. Mistakes were made by the administration. Who are you? No, I am the head of the administration. No, that is unsaid. So this is what is called as a generalization apology, which has no meaning. Which has no meaning. Oh, there's another apology. Call it the if apology.
This is all in Google?
No. So, see, you have to always supplement from your head what Google says. Because Google says too much, then it has to be sifted out. You have to discard things. You can take some things, and then you have to put your own thing in it. It's like our cooking, Indian cooking. There is no recipe that gives it. Everything has to be doctored. So this is a doctored cook. You won't find all this. It's coming from my head, some of it. So there is an if apology. If I hurt you, I'm sorry. I'm hurt. I'm bleeding. I'm in pain. And then the fellow tells me, if I hurt you, I'm sorry. What is this if I hurt you? Who else is there around here? You're the one who did, so this is called as a if apology. It is not a real apology. So these kinds of what are called as non-apologies, which don't initiate the process of forgiveness, really. If somebody gives this kind of an apology and accepts forgiveness, it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen because there's no processing. Just as there is this pseudo apologies, there's also pseudo forgiveness. There's pseudo forgiveness also. So in pseudo forgiveness, which is, a forgiveness has to be timely and appropriate. Forgiveness cannot be when the time is gone. All the damage is done. Years have passed. Now the fellow is on his deathbed. Suddenly everybody feels guilty about everything. When it's time to go, because you don't know who you're going to account. Here you got away with things. And later on I will now be accountable for everything. So then I go there and say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry to the whole world for whatever, and then think that everything is going to be so wiped off the slate. So it's something like saying, this is too little, too late. You go to Bhagavan. Bhagavan says, my dear son, too little,
Too late.
too late. So it has to go. Isn't it better than nothing? No, maybe better than nothing. I'll give you a few punyams. But then, so that is called as a untimely. For it to be meaningful, it has to be timely. It has to be appropriate also. Premature forgiving. Premature forgiving. So Babuji saw the vase falling. Even before it fell and broke, Dheeraj, don't worry about it, don't worry about it. So it's like, I forgive you. Just don't think about it. That's called premature forgiving. Because I haven't even caused the damage yet. So that means there's no processing here. You didn't give me an opportunity to apologize before you even forgive me. So that means it loses its whole, the purpose that it is supposed to serve. People do this sometimes. So out of our own anxiety, somebody does something to me. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know how they're going to react. I don't know whether I'll be rejected. I don't know. No, so we say, no, it's okay, it's okay. Whatever you do, it's okay. Because otherwise I don't want to create another big event. So we prematurely do it, not in response to a process. That's also not helpful to either party. A or B. Then there is what is called as a insincere pseudo forgiveness, saying it for the sake of saying it. Yeah, nothing bothers me after all. This is only some object. This whole world is mithya. You give a big lecture about how small things. After all, it's only money. What does money matter to me? It doesn't. You can buy another. This kind of a false sense of. So it's like things don't. Even though inside it does matter. It's called. There's no real forgiveness, no letting go, but a kind of a pseudo forgiveness. Or there is another thing in terms of forgiveness is the inability to forgive. That's another obstacle. Sometimes in us, we're just not able to let go. We hold on to the anger, we hold on to the hurt, we nurture this negative emotion within us rather than be able to let it go. And they say, when you nurture anger, when you nurture hurt, it's not so much about the hurt, it has more to do with nurturance. It has more to do with nurturance. You want to hold on to something, irrespective of whether it is positive or negative, it doesn't matter. So it's a negative way of holding on to something which you don't need to hold on to. So there is a difficulty in letting go, which we sometimes have. We connect to the person in a negative way. We don't want to let, in carrying a hurt, we carry the person inside our head and suffer from it. So thus, there is this whole dynamic that has to do with forgiveness. So this is, I heard this one time in talking about the pseudo apologies. Very interesting. So this is a person